Okay, in this video, I'm going to walk through actually a chess game here with notation. The goal is to try to help people understand a little bit more of what chess notation is. And if you're not sure what that is, you can look on the right-hand side of the screen over here and see just a whole lot of letters and numbers and symbols and stuff. If you don't know what that means, that just looks crazy. The goal, hopefully, by the time I'm done with this video, is that you feel more comfortable with what exactly all of that means. Now let me quickly just point out all the capital letters in all of this code over here. As I skim through this, I see a capital N, I see a capital B, and a capital N, capital B. Now I'll see some other capitals here. Eventually there's a Q, and eventually here we should see a couple others. There's R's, N's, and Q's, and here's a K right here. They're all over. Well, guess what? The capital letters are telling you which piece has been moved. And so, as I walk through here quickly, I see a capital N as a knight. Now we have to go with the sounds. N, knight. I know a knight is spelled with a K, but K is for king. So N stands for the knight was moved, and B stands for the bishop was moved. And there's an N, a bishop or a knight move, and there's another bishop move. Q is when the queen moves here. And we've got a K down here where king moves. And now you notice these first moves don't have a capital letter attached to them. And those are pawn moves. So unfortunately, pawns don't receive a capital P for pawn. Unfortunately, they've just, I guess, been cheated all the time. And so the other thing you need to know is the move is going to show what square it moved to. So this first move, E4, is shown on the board. It says E4, there's no capital letter, so a pawn moved to E4. And you can see that on the board. Now just after E4, you can see the next move is D5. And there's no capital letter there, so it's a pawn, and a pawn moved to D5. So I'm going to come over to the board, and I'm going to find the D5 square. There's my D5 square right there. It says, hey, there's a pawn that moved there. That's basically what it says. And so I'm going to move that pawn there to D5. That was the move. Okay, so this D5 move is where a pawn moves. You'll see these little boxes show up, and that's just me putting color on the board there eventually, where I put the green square on. The next move here, as I sort of slide over, it's white's turn to move. You see E, X, D5, and we have kind of some new notation here. Now, there's no capital letter, so we can understand this is a pawn move. We can see this D5 here, which means something moved to D5. And an X, anywhere you see an X, it means a piece was captured. So as I look through the rest of this code, this notation, I see that a piece is captured here, a piece is captured here, and pieces are captured everywhere I see an X. So I can see that the pieces are being captured on these X's here. So here it says takes or X or captures D5. Now we're trying to figure out what captures on D5 here. Well, technically it's white's move, and we can see this pawn is going to take it. Now the computer chooses to go E, X, D5 because the pawn was on the E file. Now, I know a lot of players will just say X, D5 because it's assumed that since it's a pawn it doesn't get a capital letter, but this says the pawn takes on D5. And the next move here is N, F6, so the knight moves to F6, and we know it's black's move. Black goes second. So over here it says move 2 for white, and then move 2 for black. So black moves a knight to F6. And then the next move, no capital letter, so this is a pawn to C4. Now in this game I'm not going to be talking about strategy or tactics or what should they have done or shouldn't they have done. This is just simply just to go through the moves. Black's turn, pawn to E5. Now note pawn to E5 here, I can see that a piece was taken on E6 in the next move. And well, something's taken on E6, and looking at the board right here, there's nothing sitting on E6. So the question would be, how on earth does that happen? How do you take something that's not there? Well, this is very important. This is an en passant situation. The pawn, the black pawn, moved through. It moved through a square where it could have been captured. And remember, if pawns move 2 on their first move, and they happen to move through a square where an opponent's pawn could have captured it, they can capture it. That's called en passant. And if you don't know about en passant, I would recommend that you study up on that special move of chess. And so it is indeed captured and is removed from the board. We can see the next move over here. Black's turn to move. Bishop, capital B, a bishop captures whatever is on the e6 square. So I come back over to the board here, and I can see there's my e6 square. There's a bishop that captured it, and you can see that the black bishop can capture that bishop on e6. Okay, so the bishop captures what's on e6. The next move over here is d4. White turn to d4. So that's a pawn move to d4. And now we have a move next that's a little bit weird. We see a knight moves, but we see bd7. There's no such thing as a square called bd7. But we need to note over here on the board something that's very important. Let's take a look at the d7 square. Okay, d7 square right here. So on the d7 square, it says we have a knight that moves there. But hey, take a look at the black knights. Do you notice that actually both of them could move there? So we have a little bit of a problem with notation right now. If we just said knight d7, we would be a little bit confused, because later on when we recreate the game, or when someone else is reading my game, they would not know which knight actually got moved there. So the question would be, how can we help the reader understand which knight actually moved there? And the answer is we are going to add in either a letter or a number to represent the rank or file, the file or rank. And in this case, they added in the letter B, because when I'm trying to decide which of these two knights, this knight on b8 or this knight on f6, which one moved there, they're telling me the B knight moved there, so the one that's on the B square. Now we could have technically used the number 8 to represent this one, and the number 6 to represent this one, but I think it's probably more common for people to use the letters than the numbers. But there are times where you would have to switch to the numbers, like if the two knights were in on the same file. If they were lined up on the same file, you'd have to use the number. So the next move is knight b to d7. So the b knight moves there, that one. Our next move is a bishop moves to d3. And so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to click through some moves. And if you'd like to pause the video to see if you can guess the move and then play it again, you could do that. So I'm going to move ahead some moves as you can check and see if you understand what's happening in the game until I get to another new scenario here. So we have bishop b4 plus. Okay, the plus is a check, and so I'm going to keep talking about new things. The plus means a check occurred, and we can see here that that bishop is checking the king. So when you see a plus, that's a check on the board. Then a knight moves to c3, and then a queen moves to e7, and then a knight moves to f3. And we have now this move where bishop takes c3 check. So a bishop takes whatever's on c3. Here's our c3 square. It looks like the bishop takes that, and at the same time that's going to be checking the king after it takes that. So we have bishop takes c3 check. We have a pawn on the b square takes c3. We have bishop takes c4 check. We have bishop e2. And that takes us now to the next strange move here if you're not familiar with chess notation. Now when you see the circles or the O's or the zeros, it is telling you that there's been a castle that occurred. And if you see 3 zeros, it means that your rook moved 3 times. Now remember, castling means that the king moves 2 and the rook jumps over. Right now if the rook jumps over, it only jumps 2 squares. If I castle queenside, the king always moves 2 and the rook jumps over, and the rook would move 3 squares to get to the other side of the king. So the 3 zeros means that, think of the zeros as the tops of the rooks, the circles on the tops. And so this means the rook has to move 3 squares. That's a queenside castle. We have bishop e3. A bishop takes on e2. A queen takes on e2. Rook, okay, here's another, we have a rook that moves to e8. And now looking at the e8 square, we have a little bit of a problem. How do we know which rook moves there? Well, the notation needs to tell us which rook moves there, and it says the one that's on the h square. The one that's on the h square moves there. So there we have it. The next we have circles or zeros. Those are castle. This is a castle move, and I can see that there are two rook movements because there's two tops of rooks if you think of it that way, which means this is a king side castle or a short castle. So the castle on the king side for white. Knight to d5, rook f to e1, queen moves to a3, queen to d3, a queen captures c3, queen captures c3, knight captures c3, bishop to g5, f6, bishop to h4, rook takes e1 and check. So rook captures e1 and that's check. That's attack on the king. Rook takes on e1, knight takes on a2, bishop to g3, knight to b4, rook to e7, rook to g8, knight to d2, a5, there's a pawn move, a5, knight to c4, a4, pawn move, bishop to f4, b5, knight to e3, a3, d5, a2, d6, and here we have another move that's a little bit different, a1q plus. Okay, we look at the board and a1 means a pawn moves to a1. Well, this is a promotion. This pawn is going to promote. And a lot of times you will see people put equals, a1 equals q plus. Okay, well the equals, or the a1q, means we move to a1, it becomes a queen, and then check happens. So the pawn promotes to a queen, and this queen is also checking the king here. Alright, as we move on, we have knight to f1 to block the check, knight to d5, rook e4, knight takes f4, rook takes f4, c, or pawn on c, takes d6, g3, rook to e8, king to g2, queen a8 check, king g1, rook e1, rook f5, queen e4, rook f4, queen e2, king to g2. Alright, queen takes f1 check, king to f3, and on the last move we can see the pound sign or hashtag or whatever you want to call it these days, depending on how old you are. But this says there's a knight to e5, and this is checkmate. That symbol right there means checkmate. The game is over. That is a check on the king. As you can see, it's being attacked. The queen has escape squares covered. The g2 squares covered. The rook has escape squares covered on the e file. And this square, the g4 square, is definitely covered by the knight. The king is being attacked by the knight. It has no way to escape. There's no way to take the checking knight. And there's no way to block a knight check. So this game is over. Checkmate. So I did put, there's a brief here list now of a website if you'd like to look at more notation, or if you want to find games with notation so that you could read through them and try to recreate them on a board just for practice if you'd like. So good luck. Learn how to write your games down. It's one of the best things you can do to bring to somebody who can help you learn chess and learn how to become better, because then they can see exactly how you're playing on a board. They can make recommendations, show you what you're doing that's great, show you what you're doing that needs some help. So good luck as you become a better chess player.